Hello, everyone, and welcome to QSMA's virtual Summit of Strengths webinar series. This is Jessica from QSMA's Family Support Department, and we thank you all so much for joining with us today. We'd also like to thank our national presenting sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis Gene Therapies, as well as platinum sponsor Scholar Rock for their incredible support of the Summit of Strength virtual webinar series. We really appreciate and thank you all for the questions that we've received in advance of this webinar, and we'll try to answer as many of these as we can during the presentation. You are also able to submit questions throughout the webinar by using the chat box feature, and you can find that located on your GoToWebinar toolbar. We'd like to note that all lines will remain muted during the webinar other than for the speakers. And if you have any additional questions after the presentation, please reach out to the Family Support Department by emailing familysupport@qsma.org. And now we'd like to welcome back our speaker, Dr. Al Freedman, who is a SMA parent as well as a child and family psychologist at Freedman Counseling Associates. Today, Dr. Freedman will be presenting on supporting siblings and SMA-affected families. Welcome, Al.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jess. I'm honored to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm coming to you live from picturesque Westchester, Pennsylvania, as always. And today, I'm honored to be talking about supporting siblings in our SMA-affected families. Again, my name is Al Freedman, and I'm both a psychologist who works with many families who have special needs kids, as well as the families in our SMA community through our support programs. I'm also the father of two kids, Jack, who's affected by SMA and 25 years old, and my daughter, Kara, his sibling, who's 20 years old. So today I'm going to talk with you from both professional and personal perspectives on how we can best support our SMA-affected siblings in our families. I'm going to share a few slides with you with a few comments and perspectives on what I've learned as a professional and as a dad, and then be opening it up with plenty of time for questions today. Thank you for having me, and next slide, please. The first observation I'd like to share with you today is that siblings are siblings with or without a disability. If we think about sibling relationships, we should remind ourselves that siblings are the longest of family relationships. We think about our own brothers and our own sisters. We think about the length of the relationship that we have with our siblings as siblings ourselves. And we think about the common bonds, the common experiences, the common closeness, the trust, the friendship that comes from being a sibling. And we think about the experience of being parented by the same parents. For better or worse, we can understand the importance of sibling relationships in general. We have both very strong bonds, a lot of love, and also some competition, some tension, and comparisons and rivalries. These are all natural dynamics in all families for all siblings. And again, as we work through this webinar together, as I'm talking, think about your own brothers and your own sisters and the relationships that you have with them and the importance of those relationships for all of us in our lives. I have one brother, talk to him almost every day, and he's a very, very close friend as well as a brother. I hope he's listening today. Next slide, please. The experience of siblings in special needs families is different for obvious reasons. This quote I found actually as I was reviewing literature research in sibling studies of siblings in special needs families. Siblings who have special needs, brothers and sisters, love their brothers and sisters, but also feel a lot of feelings that are complicated in the experience. Some feel resentment, some feel some guilt, some feel some discomfort, some feel frustrated at the lack of time their parents have to take care of them because of the special needs of their brother or sister. But in the end, what has been studied closely by researchers is this common love that siblings have for their brothers and sisters. I love my brother, but sometimes I don't. Next slide, please. For those of us who have SMA kids, it's really, really important to have a wide support system for all kinds of reasons. We can't take care of our kids unless we're healthy ourselves. A wide support system can include caregivers, in our case, nurses or aides with SMA kids. It can include family, include friends. It can include our school or faith communities. It can include a wide range of people and systems that help us to take care of our SMA-affected kids. And by having that support system in place, it directly and indirectly assists our siblings to get what they need. It's not easy for some of us as parents to accept help. We naturally want to take care of our kids ourselves. That's our job. So as our kids grow, and if their needs become more complicated over time, as my sons have, we learn that in order to take care of ourselves, we need to accept more help. And by accepting more help and widening the support system for our families, it allows us as parents to replenish, to take care of ourselves, and to stay healthy. And it also frees us up to pay attention and take care of the needs of our siblings who are not affected by SMA. One of the things that I've learned over the years, and one of the things that children have told me in my work, is that they so appreciate when their parents accept help and allow for this wider support system so that their parents are freed up to help take care of them as well. A wide support system for families always helps siblings. Next slide, please. While siblings of SMA kids need their space and they need their own activities, shared activities within families bring siblings closer together. When I've spoken with siblings of our SMA kids, and when I've spoken with siblings in my office, and all the studies I've read indicate that siblings so appreciate when families do things together. And obviously, in our SMA-affected families, we can't do everything that everybody else can do all the time because of access issues, because of medical needs, and because of other complications, and now because of pandemic. But whenever you can find common activities that all of our kids can participate in together, that has a great value for a family, and it has a great value for siblings. Siblings like to see their SMA-affected brothers and sisters be part of the family. They like to participate in any activities that everybody can do together. For your family, that might be taking an outing together. It may be watching a movie or a TV show together. It may be playing a board game together. It may be as simple as reading a book, a story together. Anything that you can do together feels connected for the siblings and helps siblings feel that their family is inclusive, that their family is together, their family is cohesive. Saying this is easy. Doing this, I know as a dad, is very hard because many of our kids are very severely affected, some more than others, by SMA. And some of our kids need constant medical attention. And some of our kids have a difficult time moving, speaking, and getting from place to place. So it's easier said than done. But what I found as a dad is that if we can be creative in how we're inclusive, that a little bit goes a long way. Shared activities bring siblings closer together, and siblings appreciate when their parents make the effort to be inclusive and to find creative ways to be together. Next slide, please. A special time for each child feels special to each child. While it's really important for our families to be cohesive and to do things together, it's also really important for us to give each of our children one-on-one time. A little bit goes a long way. And it's not easy to do given the medical challenges and some of the limitations of our SMA-affected kids. This is another reason why accepting help and having a wide support system is critically important. If we have a wide support system and we're able to free ourselves up to take care of our non-affected siblings, then we're in a stronger position to give that special one-on-one time to each of our children. One-on-one time doesn't need to be for 6 or 7 or 10 hours. It can be a short period of time. It can be a quick trip to the ice cream store under normal conditions when there's not a pandemic. It can be as simple as reading a bedtime story. It can be as simple as watching a half-hour TV show. But whenever our siblings feel their parents' love and attention and affection alone during one-on-one time without their siblings around, whether they're affected by SMA or not, our children feel attended to by their parents. This is especially hard in larger families when parents are outnumbered by children. With or without SMA, I see plenty of families in my office where there are 2 parents and 3 kids or 4 kids or 5 kids or even more. When parents are outnumbered by children, with or without a disability, it's very hard to pay one-on-one attention to each of the children. But a little bit, again, goes a long way. And when I talk with kids in my office about their experience within their family, they almost always talk about that special trip that dad took them on, or the special time that they had with mom just cuddling up and watching a TV show in the den. It's these small things that may not be as noticeable to us as parents that are very, very noticeable to kids. And one of the things that I would encourage would be to sit down with each of your kids, SMA affected or not, and ask them, if I had time to spend with you, special time, if we had special time together, what would you like to use that time for? What would you like to do? And sometimes I have families just simply make a list. Kids make a list and bring it to the parents. And they say, if you had even an hour to spend just with me, here's what I wish we could do. And that wish list is a very special opportunity for parents to reciprocate when their kids are meeting their expectations and doing all the things that they should be doing as kids. Parents reward them with that time doing that special thing. During a pandemic, those lists are shorter right now in order for all of us to be safe. So this is a tall order. But even within the home, to have that special time, one-on-one, reading a story, reading a book, watching a movie, playing a board game, playing a card game, doesn't have to be a big deal. But I can tell you that it goes a long, long way, especially within our SMA-affected families, when our siblings are so understanding most of the time about our need as parents to spend extra time with their SMA-affected sibling because of medical needs and because of the limitations that SMA presents. Our siblings are generally very patient, very understanding, want to help, want to support their SMA-affected sibling, but they're also hungry for attention, as all of us are as children, and deserve our attention. So we want to do what we can to provide this special time to each of our kids, which will feel special to each of our kids. Next slide, please. Our siblings of our SMA-affected kids are seeing a lot and they're hearing a lot all the time. And sometimes the siblings of our SMA-affected kids are hesitant to ask a lot of questions or to express their own concerns or fears because our siblings don't want to add to the burdens of parents. Siblings are sensitive to the energy that we parents put into taking care of our kids. Siblings are aware of the burdens and the stresses and the strains. Siblings are watching and they see the demands placed on parents. So because of that, they sometimes will stay a little bit back and not speak up and not ask questions because they don't want to add to our burdens as parents. So as parents, what we can do is to be open with all of our kids about what's happening with their brother and sister as appropriate, and to create that kind of condition of openness so that our siblings aren't afraid to ask us questions. Let all of your kids know that it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to talk about what they're seeing and what they're hearing, and it's okay to ask questions about what they're seeing and what they're hearing that might confuse them or have them worried or have them concerned. And when it's appropriate and there's a decision to be made about what we might do as a family, what activity we might do, or whether we should do this or that or go here or there, or a decision about the SMA affected sibling, when it's appropriate, depending on the age of the child, it helps to include them or at least inform them about a decision that's being made so that they're not surprised, they don't feel that secrets are being held, or they feel like they shouldn't be included or ask questions about things they're wondering. Many siblings, when I work with families in my therapy practice, will sometimes raise questions with me about their families, about their special siblings, that they might be a little afraid to ask their parents. And that leads to an opportunity for me to help the child ask these questions to their parents directly, sometimes with my help, so that they can see that it's okay to do that. And so that parents can see and understand what their younger siblings or unaffected siblings are thinking about and wondering about and worried about. And again, because our siblings are sensitive and they tend to be very compassionate, very patient, and very independent, they sometimes will be hesitant to do that because they don't want to add more burdens to our families and to the parents. So as much as possible, we're open with our siblings and include them in family conversations and in decision making as much as possible. And again, sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. But when it is appropriate to be transparent and open, it helps not only to provide information to siblings who may be wondering what's happening, but it also creates conditions under which they feel that it's okay to talk about these things. Next slide, please. And actually, this is a shorter presentation today because I want to encourage more dialogue and questions and answers in this session. So this will be the last formal slide I have, which is recognize the special gifts in all of your children. Each of our children are very, very special. And yes, our SMA affected kids are special in their own ways, and they're getting a lot of attention and need a lot of extra attention for medical reasons. And our SMA affected kids sometimes attract extra attention. I know my son has. And sometimes my daughter has felt a little bit in the shadow of my son and all the attention he received. So it's been very important for her to have recognized who she is as a person and the special gifts that she brings. And for each of our kids, it's very important, with or without a disability, that we search for and help our kids find their strengths and their gifts and do everything we can to encourage them to develop those gifts. So your children may be really good at sports, maybe good athletes, maybe good at art, maybe really good at school, maybe really good at all kinds of different things. Whatever that talent is, whatever that interest is, whatever that special gift that your child has, I would encourage you to recognize it and to create space for your child to develop that special gift. My own daughter is a tennis player and she's very athletic. And it's been a real gift for her to have the space and the time to be an athlete at the college level now without her brother and his unusual circumstances affecting her development and her development of that special gift. Having her own space, having her team, having her teammates, having her coach, having her competition, having the trips to the other colleges to play matches have all been part of recognizing one of her many special gifts. That's just one example. For all of our kids, we want to do everything we can. And for our SMA-affected, our siblings or SMA-affected kids, we want to really search for ways to help them develop those special gifts so that they can both continue to develop their compassion, their empathy, and their independence, which comes naturally when you have a brother or sister with SMA, but also have them develop their own unique and individual gifts outside of being the sibling of somebody with SMA. This is vitally important for our kids' development. It's vitally important for any child's development, but it's especially important for SMA-affected siblings to have those opportunities as they're growing, as they're developing, and as they're trying to find their way in the world and trying to understand who they are in the world. Both being the sibling of an SMA-affected brother or sister and being their own person. So for us as parents, it's hard to do. Again, this is another example of it's easier said than done, certainly for me too, to do this because our hands are full being parents of a kid affected by SMA. I know personally that the challenges associated with SMA and the care and all the demands of us as parents to properly and safely care for our kids. I've spent enough nights in the hospital to know how hard it can be and how hard it can be to take care of a second child or a third child or a fourth child in many of your cases um, while taking care of an SMA affected child. But as much as we can, to give them the one-on-one time and to recognize their special gifts, that is very, very important. And at the same time, the special gifts in our SMA affected children are also important to recognize. And our siblings are observing how we do that as well. Our SMA affected kids also bring unique and special gifts that are very different sometimes than the gifts that siblings bring. So as our siblings are observing how we recognize all of our kids' gifts, they're going to be watching us and learning from us. We're modeling for them every step of the way. That's my final slide. I hope this shorter presentation today has been helpful, and I'd like to add to it by receiving questions and responding to questions that have come in and questions that Colleen has there to pose to me. And thank you for having me today, Colleen, and I welcome questions.
Oh, thank you, Al. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Colleen McCarthy O'Toole from the Cure SMA Family Support Department. And as Al said, we're going to go over some questions that we've received. So the first question that we have is, obviously, we know that there are so many researchers who study SMA as a disease. Are there any researchers or research on the experiences of siblings of children affected by SMA or other conditions?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, Colleen. There are a lot of there's been a lot of study on siblings of special needs kids, not necessarily SMA kids specifically, but the studies are based on, in our field, what we call family systems theory. And family systems theory means that what affects one member of a family affects all the members of the family, that we're not individuals in isolation from our families. So the family systems theorists who've studied this have seen significant effects in terms of family systems dynamics. What affects one member of the family affects the other. So a special needs child and the profound impact that special needs child brings to a family has an impact on siblings, both positive and negative. So what the studies have shown is that kids who have special needs siblings have effects and influences that are both positive and challenging. Siblings in the research are found to be kinder, compassionate, more generous, have open hearts, and also independent as compared to siblings who don't have a special needs child. Our siblings tend to be independent because they have to be, because their parents don't have as much time to do things with them and for them, so they learn to do them themselves. That's a positive quality, independence, and certainly compassion and open-heartedness and generosity are positive qualities. There are also some challenging effects because kids with special needs siblings worry about them. So there can be a vulnerability or higher prevalence of anxiety because of anxiety is a fancy word for worry. And when we have a kid with SMA at home, we are worried about that child staying healthy. And it's not easy to stay healthy all the time. So understandably, siblings with special needs kids would have a little more vulnerability to anxiety and to worrying because of the experience of the challenges their siblings face. There's a whole lot of research, but that's kind of boiling it down to a couple of simple concepts. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. Another question. In general, how do you think siblings of children with special needs feel about their brothers and sisters?
Well, like any siblings, there is a strong bond, and siblings of kids with special needs absolutely love and care about their siblings with special needs, and they're very protective of them as well. A lot of the siblings that I work with know a lot about their brothers and sisters' care, and they want to make sure that their brother and sister is taken care of properly, and that they're protected, and that everybody involved in their care is doing the right thing. So siblings, one, are love and protect their special siblings, and they want to make sure that they're okay. And secondly, siblings of special needs kids sometimes feel some tension or sometimes, in some cases, resentment if their special needs sibling is taking their parents' attention to the point at which they don't have enough attention. Or in practical terms, if I'm a middle school girl and I want to go to the dance, and my parents say, well, we'd love for you to go to the dance, but we can't drive you there. We can't leave. We can't leave to go. Then that causes a sibling to be frustrated sometimes. So there are some unique circumstances that bring about both a strong bond and a strong love, and also having to adapt to a difficult situation that causes siblings to sometimes feel discouraged or frustrated, and that's understandable under certain conditions. It's certainly been true with my daughter in her sort of, I'm not sure I'd call it a love-hate relationship, but I'd certainly say there's a back and forth depending on the situation. So in general, there's a lot of love and there's some tension.
Great. When you're working with the parents of special needs child as a psychologist, what do you tell parents who are concerned about their other children, about the siblings that we're talking about today?
Well, parents often are more worried about the sibling than the sibling is worried about him or herself. Mm-hmm. So I tend to get to know the child and then come back to the parents to reassure them that the child's okay. And parents need reassurance because we parents are all doing the best we can. Like whether you have a kid with a disability or not, we're all doing the best we can, and we're all trying to do the right thing, and we're all hoping that we're being good parents. You have kids too, right? So you want to make sure your kids are doing okay. I want to make sure my kids are doing okay. Sometimes people need reassurance that their kids are doing okay. So the first thing I do is reassure a parent that their child's doing okay, because that's what the child tells me. And when the parents ask, what can I do for this child that's a sibling of somebody with a disability or a severe disability, what I tell them is to listen to their child and to listen to what their child says they need. It's really not all that complicated. And the children are always very open about their experience and about what they need. So if we simply listen to the children that we live with and the children that we work with, they'll tell us what they need. And every child's different. Some children say, I don't need anything, I'm fine. And other children will say, I really need to be able to get to my baseball practice on time. It's really hard when I'm late because I'm trying to be the best pitcher and the starting pitcher, and I want the coach to pick me to be the guy who's going to pitch the big game. And every time I'm late, it means that the coach might not have as much confidence in me, and they might not let me pitch in that game, or I'll be the second pitcher instead of the first pitcher. So could we please be on time to baseball practice? I know it's hard to get my sister in her wheelchair in the van. And I know it takes extra time, and I know it's really hard for you, Mom and Dad, but it would mean a lot to me if we could get to baseball practice on time. So I could give you 1,000 examples of stories kids have told me like this, and every child's different. Every child has a different story. But if we listen to what their concerns are, then we can meet their needs, whatever they are, as best we can. Or if we can't, we then can explain why we can't. And for that child, maybe somebody else gives them a ride to the game, and I'm reassuring Mom and Dad that it's okay if somebody else's mom and dad takes the boy to the game so he can be on time and be the pitcher, and they can get there a little later and see him pitch. So sometimes parents need to be reassured they're doing the right thing, and help them to learn to simply ask the question, what do you need? Sometimes, as a psychologist, I hear things that parents don't hear, again, because the kids don't want to burden their parent. So sometimes you need another person in order to have the child feel comfortable speaking up. But if we create conditions under which our kids feel like they can't speak up, they usually do. I hope that helps to start.
Yeah, definitely. Another question, Al, you're not just a psychologist, obviously you're a dad too. Your daughter Cara is 5 years younger than Jack, who has SMA. What kind of challenges has she faced, and what have you done to support her needs?
Kara's a good kid, and she came to our family as an adoptee from Korea when Jack was 5. So she literally learned how to walk climbing up the side of his little wheelchair. She's faced a number of challenges because Jack was sick a lot when she was younger, and in and out of the hospital 200, 300 nights in a PICU over these years, thankfully not recently. But Kara's life has been disrupted by her brother's hospitalizations, by the ambulance showing up to take him to the hospital. She's seen a lot of things that are hard for kids to see. She's worried about her brother. And she's not been able, when she was younger, before she was old enough to drive a car, it was hard for us to get her everywhere she wanted to go, every time she wanted to go. She also faced the challenge as she became a teenager of the reactions of other kids to her brother. And I actually talked to her about this session when I was planning for it, and I asked her about advice about what I could say to parents and siblings based on her experience. And she talked a little bit about challenges socially when she was a teenager and the reactions of other kids coming to the house to visit, and that it was hard for her to know how to handle that, so she would tend to not invite people as much to the house because she didn't want to have to deal with whatever the response would be. So I could go on with a number of challenges, but these are some of the common challenges that siblings of our SMA-affected families face. And Kara has always faced these challenges with a lot of grace and a lot of honesty, and she's a really good sport. I think our kids tend to be really good sports because they're compassionate and kind and understand. She understands and loves her brother and his special needs, but it's sometimes complicated with people who don't know SMA, don't know what her brother looks like, and having as a teenager to navigate that has been hard for her.
Has being Jack's sister impacted Cara in positive ways? Can you tell us about how she's doing now?
Absolutely. Kara is, as the researchers have suggested, she is kind, she is flexible, she is independent, she is open-hearted. She, as you know, comes to the SMA conferences and volunteers in the child care room, and she's beautiful with all these other kids, younger kids and little girls especially, who have SMA. She is a helper. She is very empathetic to other people and their special needs. She's very protective of people who are vulnerable. She is appreciative of doctors and nurses and people who have been involved in her brother's life and who have assumed responsibility for his care. She's very grateful and has developed relationships with a number of people who interact with her brother because she appreciates them. I'd like to think that Kara's path in life um, uh, has and will be affected in positive ways by the experience, and very proud of her. She's a really good kid, and um, she's going to make a difference in this world in part because of the impact her brothers had on her. I'm very proud of her. Thanks for asking.
That's great. Many of our SMA families have nurses or aides that come into their homes. How do the siblings feel about having professionals in their houses helping with the care of their brothers and sisters?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just as for us parents, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag for siblings as well to have professionals in the home helping with care. On one hand, it's uh, it's an intrusion in the sense that our homes are not private when we have nurses living in the home. And right now, my son Jack, he's very stable. He's doing really well, but he does have a ventilator and he has a trach and he has a wheelchair and he has a nurse 24 hours a day when there's coverage. So there's always somebody in the house. And Kara is home now from college because of the virus. She's doing college from home and not at college in an effort to protect her brother from the virus. So on one hand, she and many siblings feel it's hard to share a home with other people. On the flip side, Karen knows that because there's a nurse in the home, that Jack is safe and well cared for. And as importantly, she knows that because there's a nurse in the home, that mom and dad are not needed to take care of Jack every second of every day. So this speaks to my comment earlier about the importance of accepting help and having a support system. The nurses and caregivers are part of that support system. So when our families have a nurse or an aide in the home, the sibling has their parents to themselves much more often. When we started getting more nursing hours, that's when I was able to get Kara to the dance easier and to her school events easier. When there wasn't a nurse in the house, it was really hard to get Jack in the van safely and quickly and then take her places with all that came with moving the wheelchair and moving the equipment. So it's a mixed bag, but in the end, I believe our siblings appreciate these professionals that are in the home because it frees up mom and dad to take care of them. And a second thing that's happened over the years is that Kara has become close to some of the nurses who take care of Jack. She's developed relationships with some of the nurses who've come and stayed for a number of years. And they're sort of part of our extended family to her, and they look after her in a certain way as they're also looking after Jack. So she does feel supported by these nurses, as well as knowing that her brother receives care. When nurses leave, it's hard for Kara sometimes because she's developed those relationships with her, and she has stayed in touch with some of Jack's nurses informally after they've left his case. So it's a mixed bag, to answer your question, but overall, very important for siblings to have their parents have the help so that their parents can be freed up to take care of them.
Great. I have actually a question that just came in, and this is probably one of the most common questions that we get from parents calling QRSMA and asking. Are there generally feelings of resentment in the sibling when the SMA-affected child is getting all the parents' attention?
There can be, and that's natural. If we think about our siblings, we think about our lives. If we don't get enough attention and our siblings getting all the attention, then naturally we would feel some resentment. It's because of the unusual conditions that our families live with SMA. It's often the case, and it certainly has been with mine in earlier years especially, that my son we had to give him our full attention when there wasn't a nurse in the house with all that he needed, and then Kara got less attention. So yes, resentment is not unusual. It's natural. It's part of the deal when you have a child with special needs some of the time for some of our siblings, not all, some of the time for some of our siblings. And the way to manage that is to give our kids the open space to talk to us about how they feel. If they're frustrated and feeling resentment, we want to let them say that and tell them it's okay to feel that way and we understand why, and that we want to do everything we can to give them our time and attention to balance out these times when they can't have our attention. This is why that one-on-one time is so important, and recognizing our kids' special gifts and helping them to develop individually away from their brother and sister, because there are always going to be times when we have to take care of our SMA-affected child and we can't pay attention to siblings. So the way I look at this, it's like a bank metaphor. Every time you have to be with your SMA-affected kid and you can't take care of your other kids, it's like a withdrawal from the emotional account with the siblings. So you know they're going to be withdrawals, and those withdrawals cause resentment over time if the withdrawals are repeated and they get too big. So how do we make deposits back in the account? How do we make emotional deposits to counteract those withdrawals? That's the one-on-one time. Those are the tennis matches that I can get her to. Those are the special trips that I take with her when I can. So we want to put deposits in the account to balance out those withdrawals. The withdrawals are going to be there, and the withdrawals would lead to the resentment, and it's natural and normal.
Great. Here's actually another one that just came in, kind of adapting it a little bit, but is there a difference? Do you see a difference in the way that younger siblings react versus older siblings, or, does everybody act for the most part the same?
No, it's yes. Younger siblings are like any children. Their understanding of the situation is based on their age and their development. So a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old can't comprehend and understand the situation the same way a 13 and a 14-year-old can. In fact, when I look back and I talked to Kara about my own daughter's experience, she told me that she didn't realize there was anything unusual about Jack when she was very young. She thought everybody had a brother with a wheelchair. And it wasn't until she got a little bit older and noticed people looking at us funny when we were out in public that it occurred to her, oh, Jack's different. So younger children, you adapt to what the norm is around you, and you can't possibly understand things that you can understand when you get older. And as you get older, your understanding deepens, but also your circumstances socially change. So whereas my daughter wasn't uncomfortable having people to the house when she was in 2nd grade, it was very different when she got to high school because of the social stuff. So yeah, that's a whole separate session would be about different developmental stages of this. Kids, we're all developing and growing and understanding things at different levels at different points in our lives. So younger children, younger siblings would have a different understanding and different experience than older siblings, for sure.
Great. Now the next one, as you know, obviously parents with kids with SMA are always very busy. They don't have a lot of extra time because it takes so much time and effort, obviously, to care for their kids with SMA. So what would you say are the most important things that parents should focus on with siblings?
Most important things I would say for parents to focus on with our siblings is, one, to recognize who they are as individuals and the gifts that they bring to the world individually, and to do everything we can to help them foster and develop those strengths and those gifts individually. Second, to give them our one-on-one time, even if it's a few minutes. The few minutes goes a long, long way. And third, to help our siblings to understand what's happening with their SMA-affected brothers and sisters, so they're not confused or worried unnecessarily. As I said before, sometimes our kids are afraid to ask because they don't want to burden us parents. So we want to give them permission to talk with us about their siblings, so that they're not wondering things and worried unnecessarily about things, and to keep that open dialogue about their siblings. I think those would be the highlights for me.
Great, thank you. One final question. What message do you have for any of our siblings from SMA families who might be listening to this today? And I know there are some.
My message to siblings who are out there is hang in there. it's not easy to have a brother or sister with SMA. Share the love that your brother and sister share with the world with others. You're a teacher. Others might be confused by the disability your brother and sister have. And as you come to understand it, and you come to respect and love your brother and sister, you'll be in a good position to teach others about what it means to have somebody with a disability. And go easy on your parents. They're doing the best they can. Your parents have a hard job, and they are doing their best to take care of you and to take care of their SMA-affected siblings, your SMA-affected siblings. So go easy on your parents. They're doing the best they can. And I'd also say, don't be afraid to share the story. When I was getting ready for this session, I found an essay that my daughter wrote in high school, which I saved. It was really beautiful. And I would encourage you to share your sibling story with others as you feel comfortable. I'd like to finish, if I may, Colleen, very briefly. I just pulled this thing out that Kara wrote all these years ago. I'd like to read a couple sentences of it for everybody. This is what she said about her brother when she was in high school. This is what I find incredible about Jack. Not just that he goes around school with a smile on his face, that he's living with this condition, that he's been so strong during his entire lifetime. He doesn't notice that he's so different from everyone. He strolls around public places with a grin on his face, seeing old friends and family, knowing places like the back of his hand, and just happy all the time that he's with his family and seeing friends. Even if he's a little different on the outside, doesn't mean that he's different on the inside. He has a heart, a personality, a way of living, a social life, and a meaning for his life. He has a way of making a long-lasting impact on every person's life he encounters, good or bad, but it's his way of impacting someone. He's my older brother, and I don't think I could ever be the person I am today if he was never in my life. I appreciate him being himself, never changing, and never seeing himself as a different person. I give him so much credit. He's the best older brother I could ask for. I wouldn't change my life in a heartbeat. By Kara. That's part of what she wrote at some point, middle or high school. And I thought it was so beautiful, and I hope it's okay to share with everybody in the spirit of supporting our siblings.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Al. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to serve our community, and I hope that this session has been helpful for everybody. Thank you, Colleen, for your help.
Oh, no, thank you.
And thank you to both of you. Hi, everyone. This is Sarah with QSMA's Family Support Department. Wow, what a great way to close that out, Al. Thank you so much. Again, as always, a very insightful and fantastic discussion. So next up, we would like to introduce Rose Domingo Horn. She represents Biogen and will be sharing their presentation, Biomarkers in SMA, an overview and the utility of neurofilament as a biological biomarker. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you, Dr. Freedman, for such a wonderful session. I really enjoyed listening to you. So next slide, please. So we will start this session with discussing what a biomarker is. So a biological marker or biomarker is an objective measure that can be used to indicate health or disease status in an individual in an accurate and reproducible manner. Disease biomarkers can serve many purposes. They can inform diagnosis and prognosis, signal disease progression, or even predict or monitor response to therapy. There is currently no gold standard biomarker for SMA, although different scales and measurements have been proposed. With the availability of now 3 disease-modifying therapies for SMA and others under clinical development, the identification of an appropriate SMA biomarker is of critical importance. Next slide, please. As you know, heterogeneity or diversity exists when it comes to how SMA affects different individuals, and therefore how those individuals can appear to others, including the clinicians that will ultimately diagnose and treat their disease. As such, there are unique challenges when it comes to the early and accurate diagnosis of SMA. Biomarkers may have utility in helping to provide a diagnosis, inform prognosis, and assess disease activity in SMA. Next slide, please. In addition, biomarkers may be useful in guiding decision-making regarding treatment initiation and the monitoring of treatment response. Next slide, please. In certain conditions, biomarkers are essential for helping to facilitate treatment planning and decision-making in a tailored and personalized way. The repertoire of biomarkers used in clinical decision-making is expanding, and there are currently a number that are under investigation and may show promise for future use in the development of a personalized care plan for individuals with SMA. Next slide, please. Several different types of biomarkers exist. Next slide, please. There are biological or molecular biomarkers, for example, small molecules, metabolites, peptides, proteins, RNA, and DNA. Next slide, please. There are also physiological biomarkers, for example, vital signs such as blood pressure, EMG or electromyography, and pulmonary function measures. Next slide, please. There are structural biomarkers, for example, imaging modalities such as MRI and ultrasound. Next slide, please. And there are histological biomarkers, for example, tissue samples such as from skin biopsies. Next slide, please. Neurofilament is an example of a biological biomarker. Next slide, please. Neurofilaments are intermediate filaments uniquely expressed in neuronal cells. Next slide, please. Along with microtubules and microfilaments, they make up the skeleton of neurons. Next slide, please. They're also essential for the radial growth or caliber of axons and the speed at which electrical impulses travel along them, or their conduction velocities. Next slide, please. 3 different isoforms of neurofilament exist, which are divided according to their observed molecular weights. Next slide, please. These are referred to neurofilament heavy chains, neurofilament medium chains, and neurofilament light chains. Next slide, please. In this simple depiction of neurofilaments, you can see that there are a number of phosphate groups along their tails. This illustrates that the majority of axonal neurofilaments are highly phosphorylated, which is a characteristic that confers additional resistance to protein degradation or breakdown. Next slide, please. Elevated neurofilament levels can be seen in the blood or cerebrospinal fluid in different neurodegenerative neurological conditions, including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, spinal bulbar muscular atrophy or Kennedy's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. Axons are rich in neurofilaments, which may be released into extracellular fluids when axons are damaged or diseased. Elevated neurofilament levels in CSF or serum are therefore often used as potential biomarkers of axonal injury, axonal loss, and neuronal death, although they have not been shown to have diagnostic utility for any given disease. Neurofilament light chain has been proposed to reflect acute axonal damage, whereas neurofilament heavy chain may reflect chronic axonal damage. Next slide, please. SMA is characterized by a loss of motor axons and aberrant or abnormal accumulation of phosphorylated neurofilament in the distal axon at the neuromuscular junction. The neuromuscular junction, or NMJ, is the synapse or connection between a presynaptic motor neuron and postsynaptic muscle. In human SMA and mouse models of SMA, a pathologic hallmark of disease is the abnormal accumulation of neurofilaments at the presynaptic terminal of the neuromuscular junction. This accumulation worsens with time and may result from a lack of SMN protein and dysregulation of axonal transport. The remaining innervated neuromuscular junctions are structurally immature and characterized by impaired synaptic function, leading to eventual denervation, otherwise known as dying back axonopathy. Studies in animal models have shown that this neuromuscular junction breakdown is an early event in SMA pathogenesis, which occurs before motor neuron dysfunction and motor symptoms develop. Next slide, please. Phosphorylated neurofilament accumulations have been observed in the neuromuscular junctions of patients with SMA. This slide shows different structures at the neuromuscular junctions in the diaphragms of healthy people versus people with SMA. Control patient tissue samples are shown across the top row, and tissue samples from patients with SMA are shown across the bottom row. On the bottom left, you can see neurofilament aggregations in an SMA patient, which are depicted by the white arrows. In the center two columns, you can see abnormal neuromuscular junction structures in patients with SMA. You can appreciate this on staining of presynaptic structures, such as synaptophysin, and postsynaptic structures, such as acetylcholine receptors. Next slide, please. On this slide and the following few slides, you will see baseline plasma phosphorylated neurofilament heavy chain levels in patients with differing types of SMA versus age-matched controls. In this graph, age will be noted along the horizontal axis, and phosphorylated neurofilament heavy chain levels will be noted along the vertical axis. First, you see the baseline neurofilament levels for healthy individuals without SMA, ranging in age from 7 months to 18 years old. And here we can see that their median level was 210 picograms per milliliter. You might also notice here that in these children without SMA, plasma neurofilament heavy chain levels were highest in the youngest infants. Next slide, please. Now, superimposed on this, you can see higher baseline plasma neurofilament heavy chain levels in children diagnosed with symptomatic later onset SMA, those most likely to develop SMA type 2 or type 3, ranging in age from 2 to 9 years old. Next slide, please. Next, you can see even higher baseline plasma neurofilament heavy chain levels in children diagnosed with symptomatic infantile onset SMA, those most likely to develop type 1 SMA, who ranged in age from 20 to 211 days old. Next slide, please. Here in light pink, you can see data from infants with pre-symptomatic SMA who were diagnosed through genetic testing prior to the development of symptoms and found to have 3 SMN2 copies. These children ranged in age from 0 to 6 weeks old. Next slide, please. And here in darker pink, you can see data from infants with pre-symptomatic SMA diagnosed through genetic testing and found to have 2 SMN2 copies. The age range for these children was 1 to 5 weeks of age. As you can see, overall, the baseline plasma neurofilament heavy chain levels are higher in patients with SMA than in healthy controls of the same age. In addition, you can see that median plasma neurofilament heavy chain levels are higher in pre-symptomatic infants with 2 SMN2 copies as compared to pre-symptomatic infants with 3 SMN2 copies. Next slide, please. This data supports the premise that neurofilament levels have the potential as prognostic and predictive biomarkers. They may help to stratify patients for treatment and potentially to monitor treatment response. Next slide, please. In addition to neurofilaments, several other potential biomarkers are being investigated in SMA. So I will mention a few of them here, but please note that this list is not exhaustive. Some examples include biological or molecular biomarkers, for example, SMN2 copy number, SMN mRNA transcript levels, and SMN protein levels. Neurophysiological biomarkers, including compound muscle action potentials, or CMAPs, and motor unit number estimations, or MUNs, both of which can be assessed with EMG studies. The CMAP is an indirect measure of the number of intact and available motor neurons, representing the total functional status of the motor unit. And the MUN provides an assessment of axon number and the capacity for reinnervation. And a structural biomarker being investigated is magnetic resonance neurography, or MRN, which is an imaging study that can detect and quantify peripheral nerve involvement in different forms of SMA. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We hope you found this overview on biological biomarkers and neurofilament to be informative. We very much are grateful for this opportunity to speak today and look forward to further collaborations both with Cure SMA and the SMA community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you again to both of our fantastic speakers for your wonderful presentations and your time with us today. We appreciate everyone who joined in on this webinar. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with a survey link, and we greatly welcome any feedback that you have to share with us. We're also thankful again for the incredible support from our sponsors for making the Summit of Strength virtual webinar series possible. If there's anything we can do for you, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great day, everyone.